Hello everyone, this is Micah Jones, and in this new series that I am starting on YouTube, I'm going to show you how I went from this raw image straight out of camera to this, the final product. Now, the first thing I will always do when I bring my pictures into Camera Raw is check the white balance. And usually, if there is something white in the picture, I can white balance right off of it. If not, then typically I kind of just try to adjust to see what looks the best. Now, I do that before I do anything else, just so I don't go back and find that something doesn't look right because of adjustments I made after the fact. And the rest of the sliders, it's really just kind of up to you. I typically flatten my images quite a bit before I bring them into Photoshop, and that's just to kind of artificially increase the dynamic range of the photo. And you'll see something I don't do too often here is I'm actually color grading it before the fact, and it's not too often because most of the time you want to do it on top because you kind of just want to affect the original image, and you want to be able to bring it back and take it away and put more in, it depends. But in this case, I knew I wanted it to look, that greenish, yellowish movie kind of color grading effect. So in this case, the effect I wanted would benefit from kind of putting a little color grading in the foundation of the image. And then after that, I kind of started messing with the saturation and vibrance just to kind of see, what it would do, and wanted to kind of bring it down because the color was definitely getting a little too saturated. And again, this is all, personal preference. Every picture is different, so depending on what yours looks like, this will change. And at this point, I started flattening out a little more, deepening the. And something you'll see me do actually is I'll bring up the shadows but darken the darks, and I don't know, it's just kind of the way I like it to look. It's like there's still some beef kind of in the darks, but they're not blowing out. And then even if you go into the color calibration here, you can actually add green or magenta to the shadows, and then the primaries, depending on how you modify them, can really have some interesting effects on the picture. So now that it's in Photoshop, the first thing you'll see me do is I do my frequency separation technique. Before I do anything to this picture, I'm going to completely retouch the skin, even before doing the noise reduction. And the point in that is that if you do everything you can to refine the picture before doing any noise reduction or any filtering effects or anything like that, you stand a better chance of having the most, undestructive, unmushy looking skin in the end. And then here, a little effect you'll see me do is make this S-curve layer and put on overlay and reduce the opacity. The point in this layer is that it will exaggerate the contrast enough in the picture that I can see blemishes much easier. So if you really want to be able to see what you want to take away, this is definitely a very helpful technique. You'll see I'll just go through and remove blemishes, remove the hairs. And typically, like with the hairs and the lines and the skin, I'll do single strokes, trying to take it nice and easy and make sure that I get rid of the whole thing in one swoop. And then when you get to lines like this, you have to use either the healing brush and be able to sample from an area that's identical, and that will typically work, but if not, you will definitely have to use the clone stamp tool. Most of the time, the clone stamp tool is what you have to use because the spot healing brush, and sometimes even just the regular healing brush, even when you're sampling, can kind of pick up some weird pixels and cause some really strange artifacts to appear. Notice I just go through the whole picture, kind of removing stuff. And even here, even with frequency separation, which is specifically usually for skin, you can even remove some stray hairs in certain areas, even if it's not on the skin. You see there, it did something kind of weird, so I went back. You can also remove the veins and eyes using frequency separation, as long as you're very, very careful and use a very small brush and are particular about it. Which in skin retouching, pretty much that's the way it works. You have to be very, very patient. There's not a single filter of any sort that can just one click remove everything and you're done. And a long time ago, I used to believe that there was some kind of filter that would be able to make skin perfect, but as I found out, that is not true. You definitely have to spend a lot of time, depending on what you want it to turn out looking like, of course. But if you want definitely the natural skin, undestroyed skin, you've got to spend time on it. Now there you just saw me. I rotated the image. Now I didn't rotate it permanently. If you press the R key on the keyboard, it'll bring up this little compass, and you can click and drag and turn your picture. And it just turns it temporarily so that you can change the angle. That way, if maybe you're trying to get somewhere and it works better up and down versus left and right, you can do that. And then once you're done, hold down the R key and just turn it back. In my case, I use a Wacom tablet, so I have the little touch dial, and I can actually shift through some commands and rotate it that way. You'll see there I came too close to the sunglasses and it caused some weird effects, so I had to go back. Now I know in this image it took me about an hour and a half, so the retouching I probably spent about 75% of that time just on the skin and probably a little bit of the dodge and burning. And that's typical. A lot of the pictures I edit, usually the stylizing part doesn't take that long. It's usually the retouching and the kind of reforming and modifying and refining of the picture. It's something I do, and I don't know. It depends on the client or the kind of a personal thing. Is I'll usually remove all freckles, any imperfections. Usually, it depends. One of the ways I've believed it to be is that if it's not a part of the person, remove it, which in this case freckles are a part of the person, but I was going for a more high fashion look with this, so I wanted to get rid of them. In some cases, you definitely won't want to get rid of certain things that are part of that person. You can see here it works out. The Wacom tablet is very good on little small spots like on his nose. With the pressure sensitivity and the pen, you'll see I haven't changed the size of my brush throughout the entire retouch, and I can get into smaller areas or larger areas, and that is because of the pressure sensitivity. When you have a Wacom tablet, you have the ability to, just like when you're drawing on a piece of paper, the lighter you do it, the lighter, the harder you do it, the thicker the line. And so you can do that if you have a tablet. Now what you'll see I'm doing here, and I just recently discovered this, and it's absolutely awesome. When retouching with the healing brush or the spot healing brush, you can change the mode of the brush to a couple different things. And so here I changed it to lighten, and pretty soon you'll see me change it to darken. The reason for that is when you change it, you can better remove imperfections that correspond to certain tonal ranges. So when I was on lighten, I was trying to remove darker pixels I didn't like without harming the lighter ones. And now I'm trying to remove the exact opposite. And for the longest time, I didn't really mess with the mode of the brush. And then on this image, when I was editing, I was like, well, let's just see how this works, and it worked out really, really good. It allows you to definitely more efficiently remove certain things without damaging the other spots. And you'll see it kind of works on this spot on him, but I still wasn't happy, so I end up backing up and using the patch tool. If you have areas of an image that you want to remove, that you have a good area you can sample from and kind of just in one chunk kind of get rid of it, patch tool can be very, very nice. It does a very good job. And you'll notice when I did that, as I made the bottom of my selection very kind of jagged, typically if you kind of roughen up your selection on certain things with skin, it will have a more accurate result. And now that depends, though, on the skin that you're retouching, if it's a certain texture to it, how the lighting is. But in most cases, making a kind of an uneven selection does a good job. Here you'll see I'm using the bottom layer of the frequency separation to just kind of modify the skin tones a little bit, which is one of the reasons why I love that technique. You have so much control over what you can do. And if you want to know how to do that, I do have a tutorial on that already. I can put a annotation or something in this video and link to it. That way y'all can see that one too. Next thing you'll notice is I merged everything into a new layer and then created a new layer on top of that is empty. And selected the brush tool, set it for current and below, and I'm trying to remove these little stray hairs. Then I go back to the healing brush. The reason is because I have a hard edge, so I can sample from the hard edge and remove these stray hairs without causing much damage, and it works out perfectly. And in this case, it's working. Some cases it doesn't work, and you would have to use the brush tool no matter what you do. Sometimes even you have to use the pen tool and remove everything, cut everything out, and then kind of with the brush tool recreate hair, which I have done and is not very fun. It takes forever. Recreating hair is definitely a tedious process, especially making it look real. And here I'm just kind of removing stray hairs from his hairline, using the healing brush tool this time just to make sure I can get the same skin texture to replace them. Even removing little stuff in the ear and even a little vein there that I thought looked a little distracting. And here I'll remove some more of the hairs that are off his forehead. And this works as long as you don't get too close to the mass of the hair. If you get too close to the bigger portions of it, it'll try to sample away from it and cause some weird blurs and artifacting. Even little stray hairs off the jacket from the fabric. And you'll see that in some of my pictures, or most of them actually. I don't shoot at low or wide open f-stops. I shoot a lot higher, like 8, 6.3. Actually, 4 is usually the lowest I'll go on an aperture. And the reason for that is I'm trying to get the most detail possible. And I'm also trying to keep the subject's face in focus. Now, once I finished all that, I was happy. I actually finally did my noise reduction, and I use Nik Software's Define 2 for noise reduction. And the reason is the noise reduction in Photoshop's good, but it doesn't do it the way that Nik's does. Nik's is like an intelligent noise reduction, and it actually determines like when and where and how much to reduce certain things on the picture. And so I've always found that to be the best. Now you'll see here I made 2 layers, a dodge and burn layer, and what these are going to be used for, not only for dodging and burning certain features and bringing out the sculpting in the face, but also to even out some of the little patches in the skin where it's got some slight like splotchy imperfections in tonality. And with a dodge and burn layer, you don't have to do a ton of them. Now, I mean, depending on the picture, though, because I have definitely had my fair share of pictures that had, like, 5 different dodge and burn layers. But for the most part, you can usually get everything you want to get done on one layer for dodging and one layer for burning, just as long as you are very gentle about what you're doing. You see, I even use it for his jacket just to bring out some features. I'll go back and forth, and I'm very picky about what I do, and I'll spend some time fiddling around and making sure I get it all the way I want it. And even here, I can do it with the eyes with the same layer, just because I'm doing it so lightly using a brush set at 1% flow that I don't have to worry about overdoing it usually. Now, what I'm doing now is I'm using blend diff, which is probably one of the best things in Photoshop. And basically, what the blend diff option does is it tells it how to blend in with the layer below and how much of it to blend in. And so you can really fine tune how your layers affect each other with that. This adjustment layer I just put in selective color. Definitely one of the best ways to kind of pinpoint colors that are in the picture and change them, or add certain colors to them, or even brighten and darken them. And you'll see I go from top to bottom, every color, all the way down to the white, neutral, and black. And I kind of just fiddle with the sliders and see, how it's affecting it, and if I like it or if I don't like it. And with this picture, doing the movie style color grading I'm doing, definitely, blues and shadows, yellows and highlights. Probably going to pump up like the midtones a little bit. And that's something with layers you definitely have to do. I mean, sometimes you just got to take the slider and just kind of go back and forth and see what it's doing, to see if you like what it's doing and see how it affects your image and if that's what you want to do to it. You can see I brought in a little bit of warmth into the midtones just to help his skin to not look so dead. And that can happen sometimes when you're doing a picture like this and trying to make it have a certain, desaturated look to it. You can go too far and make people look kind of corpsey, which is not that great. You'll see I forgot to remove the logo, so I go back to the layer and start using the clone stamp to remove it. And this is the great thing, actually, about using layers on top of layers that affect each other without actually merging and duplicating the layers constantly, because you can go back and change something if you don't like the way it looks. The more non-destructive you can be with your editing, the better, just in case you mess something up or you forget something. You see I put in a hue saturation layer because it was definitely a little too colorful. Try to remove some of that. Next thing here is color or gradient maps. And one of the coolest things I found in Photoshop probably about a year ago is that they have this little library of photographic tones that you can use in the gradient map adjustment layer. And what they are is they're designed to imitate all the different color variations that film could be processed in, like back in early 1900s and stuff like that. So like the different blues and the different sepias and platinum and copper tones, and they were designed, I don't remember who designed them, but by a guy that wanted to specifically make stuff that was spot on with the way those films looked as far as color ranges. And you'll see the way I used it, I just put it on a soft light overlay and reduced the opacity just to pump in a little more contrast and color. You see I'm adding another hue saturation layer just to modify it a little bit more. Now this curve layer, basically some of my finalizing curves I do is I like to kind of squash the range, so I'll like darken the blacks, but then I bring them in and kind of fade them. And I do the same with the highlights, and then I reduce the opacity of the layer. Now as you can see, I forgot to use my plugin. I do use the portraiture plugin for skin to soften it a little bit, but I only use it very, very, very lightly because I do not like using it in a high amount because it does make skin look a little too fake and soft. So if you use it and you have the settings set right, you can just put it just a little bit and it helps to keep the skin looking still real but have a softer tone to it. And I always use layer masks to make sure I'm only affecting the skin. You can see that top one, I'm boosting the yellows and kind of darkening them a little bit. And trying to see if I can play with the greens and different things. And again, a lot of this stuff, it is personal preference. I mean, there is certain ways to do this look, but it is really, in this case, just a matter of going through it and kind of seeing what affects what and what it looks like and what you want it to look like. So this new layer I just created here, I'm basically just adding in kind of light sources. The angle that I had the flash at going towards his face, I wanted to look like it was a more kind of warm sunset light coming from that direction. And then the exact opposite, I'm going to put like a blue tone. And, you know, again, this is just a little filter effect kind of thing. I mean, it's just color on top of layer with a different blending mode with a blur radius on it. And it's just a matter of what you like and what you want it to look like. And with this, I'm trying to use colors that are similar to the picture, but not completely the same, because in a minute I take the layer and I actually put it underneath all of the adjustment layers so that they can affect this layer and make it kind of blend in better. You see, I kind of went through all the different blending modes and trying to see what they looked like depending on, you know, kind of what I wanted. Putting a little light back there behind his head, kind of a rim light. So now I've put a black and white layer, and I'll typically do this with a ton of my pictures. And once I've gotten it looking really good, I'll usually add a black and white layer, play with the sliders, see what it looks like, and then I'll reduce this layer's opacity and put it on a different blending mode just to kind of pop in a little more contrast, but something that benefits the underlying layer and not just a desaturated layer on top. So now I grouped them all together, and I reduced the opacity of the entire group to 75%. And the reason for that is because I want everything to blend in with the bottom layer just a little bit so that that underlying layer is still alive in the picture. So then I merged everything, and I'm making a high pass layer at 3 pixels. And the reason for that is just to sharpen up some of the edges. And high pass is probably the best way to do that. You don't want to go too intense on the high pass, because you go too intense, you get haloing, and haloing, no matter what anyone says, looks bad. So now that I like that, I merged it down, and now I'm running my Nik Software Sharpener Pro 3 filter, which out of all the sharpening I've ever done, I absolutely love it. I have not been able to find anything else that looks or does as good of a job as the Nik Software sharpening. I can get something out of Photoshop that looks really similar, and maybe in the future, I mean, you never know, I might end up going all Photoshop and not using any plugins, but I try to intertwine, all the plugins with all the Photoshop stuff, and I'll stick with the NYX software sharpening for now because I like the way it looks. So that is it for that. I hope you all enjoyed this video, and I hope you all learned something from it. If this was too fast through, let me know in a comment below. I can definitely slow them down. This picture took me about an hour and a half to edit, and I sped it up to about 25 minutes, just so I wouldn't bore you all to tears too long. I know it's a little fast, but hopefully some of y'all will learn something from it. But definitely let me know if you want some longer videos in the future. And that is how I went from the original image straight out of camera to the final movie style graded photo like this. And so if you want to keep up with me and keep up to date with the videos I put out, definitely subscribe to the YouTube channel. I plan to do plenty more of these in the future, and if you'd like to see some of my past work kind of walked through, I could definitely do that. Just let me know. And I will see you guys later. See ya.